In last week's episode, we looked at the consumer decision-making process and the 5 progressive stages that the typical consumer goes through when making a purchasing decision. And if you skipped class last week, I've got them up here on the board. So first up is need recognition, then we have information search, evaluation of alternatives, the purchase decision, and then finally post-purchase evaluation. And what we said last week is that consumer behaviours can be influenced and leveraged for a better result. But in order to do this, firstly you need to understand your customer journey and the decision-making process, and then you need to design your sales process to optimise each stage of the process. Now, dealing with a consumer in a retail market is quite a different scenario to selling to organisations in a business-to-business environment. So I'd like to spend some time today to flesh out some of the complexities of B2B selling and how this impacts the consumer decision-making process. So there's a few key differences selling in a B2B environment. So first up, there tends to be fewer customers placing larger orders. This means that more effort needs to be spent closing the opportunities that you're getting. So it's critical that your concentration of effort or resource within your sales pipeline is balanced all the way through. No point in gaining loads of leads and then falling down on follow-up in the final stages. And then relationships, much more important in a B2B environment than they are perhaps in a retail environment. So there's often a greater unwillingness to change suppliers once a relationship is established. So you need a customer retention strategy to help you maintain relationships and keep existing customers, but you also need flexible strategies that will overcome existing relationships and actually prize customers away from the competition. And then rational motivation. So business buyers are more rationally motivated perhaps than retail consumers. They're buying because of specific objectives, not on a personal whim or on a personal need. So a business buyer is less likely to buy on impulse or be swayed by promotional messages, which means that you need a structured sales process. It's absolutely critical to have that structured sales process rather than just bombarding prospects with marketing messages. And then complete a solution. So businesses usually buy a complete solution or a complete range rather than making piecemeal purchases. And what this means is it allows for differentiation and provision of extra value rather than just competing on a like-for-like basis. And then the buying process. It tends to be a more professional buying process, with purchasing done by a formally trained purchasing officer. Another key distinction is the complexity of the process. So B2B buying usually takes longer, is mostly more complex than consumer buying, and often has more people involved. And where more than one person is involved in making a decision to buy a product or a service, this is known as a complex sale or complex selling. And this group of people is known as a decision-making unit. So there's typically between 2 and 6 types of people in a decision-making unit, even though sometimes they may be the same person. So first up, there's the gatekeeper, which is the person that controls the flow of information into an organisation or access to other decision makers, such as a receptionist. Then you may have an influencer who can inform or sway the opinions of the rest of the group. You've got a decider. This is the key person making the decision that a product should be bought. This is likely to be the manager or the purchasing manager. And then the buyer is the person tasked with making the transaction happen. Again, this might be the purchasing or the procurement manager. The financier has control over the budget and often the timing for the purchase. Typically this would be the finance manager. And then finally the end user, which is the person or a group of people that will actually use and benefit from the product. So the more of these people that you can connect with during a complex sale, the more chance you have of actually closing the deal. So they all need to be communicated with, as they all affect the purchasing decision, but they all have different objectives that need to be met. So sales reps need to communicate persuasively to the gatekeeper, to get an appointment or to pass information on to other decision makers. You need to then make sure that the way your business communicates is effective and that there is good, persuasive information and sales material for the purchaser or the influencer to digest. So take a look at your sales process and customer journey. What does it look like? Who do you come into contact with? How many different types of decision makers? What are their objectives? And then finally, what can you do perhaps to better understand the decision making process of your customers in order to engineer better sales outcomes?